Hey folks, today we're not going to talk about real estate. We're not going to talk about mortgage rates. What we're going to talk about is the state of our economy right now. And I came across this morning, and then I put these pieces of the puzzle together with some other slides I'm going to show you as well, just to show you kind of how out of control things are right now. And I'm not fear-mongering on this. Guys, we have to really take control of this because our national debt's getting out of control. When I was younger, I never really cared. I'm like, okay, it's the deficit. Well, whatever. Every administration has deficits. This one's getting crazy. You had Jamie Dimon out a couple weeks ago saying the number one concern he has in the world right now, it wasn't the wars in other countries and anything. It's political spending or the reckless spending that we have in the economy right now. So without further ado, I want to play this video. And this is one of the House of Representatives. He's confronting Janet Yellen, who's the Secretary of State. And they banter back and forth. And I know it's a political ploy. One's, trying to get points in the media. The other one's just trying to cover their positions. But I want to go through this. And then what I'm going to show you is where the deficit is now. And this isn't going to be a shock to most of you. Some of it might be. And then just two elements of where the government kind of forgave things. And I know you guys know that I'm not a proponent of student loan forgiveness. But that's just a blip in the bucket when it comes to how much forgiveness there is out there. So without further ado, let's break this down. Let's look at the economic data that we have from Janet Yellen and from a congressman here saying, really indicating how bad inflation is. And then we're going to take a deep dive into the numbers. So let's get to it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Secretary Yellen, for joining us today. As you know, last month, the inflation came in hotter than expected for the third month in a row. Which is a hit to American families by itself, but it's not just a one-time impact. Inflation is cumulative, and hardworking Kansans have been suffering for 3 years now, as this chart behind me indicates. Since Joe Biden took office, inflation's up over 19%. Joint Economic Committee estimate that Kansans are paying an average of nearly $1,000 more per month for the same goods and services, the same food, the same clothes, the same gas, the same rent, that they did in January of 2021. And since then, in total, the average Kansan household has spent $23,600 more due to inflation. At the same time, net income is down almost 4%. I know your boss and his administration like to point to rosier numbers, but the fact is, for everyday Americans, the chart behind me is the epitome of Bidenomics, and it's a complete failure. Several years ago, Secretary, you mentioned that and called inflation transitory. And since you said that, I think that's the wrong word, but I guess I'd like to ask you what you would call inflation now. What word would you use?
Well, inflation has come down considerably, and the consensus of thinking among economists is that it was largely due to supply shocks that are mitigating, and our inflation has been quite similar to that in other advanced countries around the world, which suggests it was due to supply shocks connected with the pandemic.
I think you'll have a difference of opinion in economists. I mean, we even had Democrat and Republican economists in 2021 talking about the extra spending that was coming proposed by the administration that was actually going to result in this inflation, and actually that's what we've seen. Well, I think most Americans would use phrases like crippling or painful or hindering the pursuit of the American dream. In fact, my constituents tell me about the challenges they face when they fill up their cars or buy their groceries or pay the rent or mortgage. And the numbers show the pain behind me that's still continuing to increase to this day. And they're the results of Bidenomics and the policies that have been increased by the Democrats over the last 3 years.
I think Americans care.
I do also want to switch gears a little bit before I run out of time. You mentioned earlier that in the discussion with Chairman Smith that President Biden was not going to increase taxes on people making less than $400,000. In fact, I have a tweet here from Joe Biden dated 1 week ago today in talking about the Trump tax cuts. And he said, this tax cut is going to expire. If I'm reelected, it's going to stay expired. I did some quick calculations, and basically what that means is that there's going to be a 25% increase in the tax rate on people that make less than $44,000. there's going to be an additional $14,000 tax increase on people making less than $95,000, and additional increases on others up until making the $400,000. So if this tweet is right, that came from President Biden, he is going to increase taxes on people making less.
Okay, we'll stop it there. And many people are going to start pandering and saying, well, he didn't say that, he didn't say this, he didn't say that. That's from his tweet. Okay, so what I want to explain to you guys is this stuff isn't free. You're not just going to get money handed to you. It has to be paid somewhere, and you can't increase taxes on the rich enough to take care of this. Also, another thing you're going to start seeing is, well, Social Security is on the verge of insolvency, and it'll be insolvent in 2039. So just remember those things right there. Okay, so now let's get over to this. Okay, the U.S. Treasury securities. How much, when and why does the U.S. Treasury issue securities? Well, when they don't have enough to pay their bills. Like me and you, if we run out of our paycheck money, how do we pay bills? We got to use a credit card. They'll use the Treasury. Okay, so that's what they do. How much have they issued so far this year? 59% more than last year. Okay, and it ain't even the year yet. Trending. You can see all this stuff here. So the balance sheets on this are going exponentially higher. Another piece of this, the PPP. Remember the PPP loans that were sent out to everybody? Well, there's going to be $755 billion forgave. Okay, so that, and then we keep adding to that pain. We keep adding to this right here. Okay, so then you topple that with the student loan forgiveness that I think is expected now to top almost $1.4 billion as well. I'm saying $1.4 trillion, possibly. The analysts come out and they say it's going to be $800 billion to $1.4 trillion that we're going to add to that over there and then add to that over here because the government doesn't have enough money. That's exactly what this is showing right here. The national deficit, okay, how much money the Americans don't have or the U.S. government doesn't have. Look at it over there, $34.7 trillion, and it's running that tally. I wish I could make money that fast. So that's what's going on. So what's going to happen here? So let me just give you an idea. The country is going to get to a point where they're paying more in interest on this money than we're actually possibly even receiving. So the national debt load is just going to keep going and going and going. So what's going to happen? Well, the government's just going to become insolvent at some point. Now, a lot of politicians will probably be stepping in or they're going to have to step in and try to curtail this thing. But there's also another piece of this element. It's called the Repo Act that was just passed. And many of you probably don't even know about it. What it does is it gives the president the authority right now, if there's any Russian assets in our country, the president can, at this point, go in there and freeze all that money, which is already frozen, actually can take that money and issue that money back to Ukraine. Okay, so think about it. I understand Russia and Ukraine are at war, but you have Russia now saying, okay, if I have any assets in America, you can actually freeze it. Not only freeze it, you can take it from me. Okay, so now what's this going to represent when you look at other countries that are financing our country, such as China? Okay, or is it we're going to be at some point where we're going to say, okay, we're going to freeze all of China's assets and then maybe just give it away? So if I'm in China and I'm looking to purchase assets in the United States, I'm probably going to think twice about that. So what we got to understand, folks, is we have to understand there's no free ride here. Okay, the government is overspending. I just showed you multiple ways on how to do this or how to look at this. The one of the things that Janet Yellen didn't talk about, she said it was supply chain issues. What she didn't talk about is how much how much money the average consumer had in their accounts during COVID. It was among the highest ever in history. So if you go over here, I hate doing this live here, but if you go over here and look at consumer disposable income chart, let's look at this. We're going to try to get the Fred. Okay, so here's the income chart that I want you guys to understand. Okay, so here it is. Let me get my head out of the way for a second. All right, so if you look at this is how much money that was in the money supply, the M2 money supply, over basically since they've been starting to analyze this. So you go back in the 1960s, and here's how much money people had in their bank accounts. This is the M2 money supply represents money in checking, savings, money market accounts, things like that. look how it gradually increased over time. Everybody was trying to work hard, save money, have a better life for them and their children. Then all of a sudden, what happened here? Just out of the blue, the consumers had more money than they ever did in history. Let's zoom this out to a 10-year term. Look at it. Look at that spike right here. So what happened during this time frame right here? Well, people had a ton of money, just a ton of money, more than they've ever had in history in their coffers. Okay? Then you couple that with a supply chain issue. What are you going to get? You're going to get inflation, and you're going to get inflation that runs rampant. I actually made comments years ago, back in 2020 and 2021. I said, this is going to have major repercussions down the road. And I actually had people taking me off of their YouTube channels because I said, how's this happening right here? You know, we have supply chain issues, plus we have excessive assets in the economy. It's just going to drive prices up. So here's also what happened during this time. So the government issued a bunch of money out there, and that was represented in the M2 money supply, you know, in the government debts that we're seeing. But there was also two events that a lot of people didn't realize. Okay, one event was called mortgage forbearance. So during COVID, what happened, or during this time frame right through here, okay, people didn't have to make a mortgage payment right through here. Okay, they had 18 months where they didn't have to make a mortgage payment. Probably 90% of the people out there. Also, you had people that didn't have to make student loan payments during this same time frame. So you have, how else can you explain this huge spike in how much money people have in the banks? So people continue to work. They continue to get checks from the government. That's all validated and verified. They didn't have to make a mortgage payment or student loan payments. What happened? They saved a ton of money. Okay, well, what happened also during that time? Prices kept going up and up and up, and people didn't really feel the burn then. Okay, now they're starting to feel the burn. Why? Well, the M2 money supply is coming quite a bit down. Let's go over just the last 5 years. You can see that. Let's go back to the last year. So the money supply has been kind of stagnant. It's still going up a little bit. That's still concerning as well. But your incomes have to go up to keep up with today's inflation numbers. That's just, you know, the facts behind everything. But right now, if this doesn't scare you, and what the government's policies are right now, it's not going to affect us. Yeah, you might see, okay, you might be able to buy a house this year. I would highly suggest it. Okay, I'm not saying everybody should buy a house. We need assets. You need a solid asset, because eventually the dollar, what's the dollar going to be worth? Eventually it has to start coming down in value because it's so diluted. So assets, that's why Bitcoin's making a rally right now. Is it the perfect time to buy real estate? Maybe not. Maybe not in your area, maybe in some areas. But you have to look at alternatives to all this stuff. So I just wanted to bring up to your attention how out of control, and a lot of you guys might say, and a lot of you guys might disagree with me. You're like, Dan, the student loan forgiveness, it's just a drop in the bucket. The PPP, it's just a drop in the bucket. Well, all these things add up. It's like, when you start cutting back on some of your bills, maybe you're cutting back on your cable bill to bring it down, $50, $60. Maybe you cut down on some of your cell phone services to save $50 or $60. You got to pinch somewhere, somehow. Otherwise, this is just going to be completely out of control at some point. So not trying to be the doom and gloomer of today, folks, but I want you to realize and understand what's happening. And that's why I do a video every day. I explain what's going on in the markets, not just purely in real estate. I want you guys to understand what oil is doing, what the bond market's doing, what the asset classes are doing, real estate, stocks, bonds, cryptocurrencies, and everything. So I hope you enjoy this video. Make any comments that you want down there below. But if you agree with me, put in a 1. I'd love to see how many people are agreeing with me. And do put in your comments down there. I do read them, and I appreciate all the comments that you guys provide me. So thanks so much for watching. God bless. Have a fantastic day. Bye-bye.